Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 33. I took my knife back from Scythia and resheathed it. With her help, Wendy and Pam managed to tuck Sandra into a Kevlar cocoon. They capped the hybrid sleeping bag body bag with a combat helmet, then eased Sandra onto the floor. Wendy attached lanyards from her armor to the shoulders of the bag and dragged Sandra along like a sled behind a string of Malamutes. Securing my helmet, I closed my eyes and had the computer paint IR signatures in great detail in the inside of my eyeballs. Looking toward the door, I saw the outline of a man with a fair pool of heat around him. Harris is down, lots of blood, and he's being moved. Ash, cover me. Snapping the safety off my AR-3000, I dashed back through the door and sprinted toward where Harris lay. The two Legionnaires dragging him toward the executive tunnel saw me coming and looked up with surprise on their faces. At least I think it was surprise, because a whining lead sleet storm exploded both their heads. They fell back against the wall in a smear of blood and brains, and Harris slumped to the ground again. I popped 2 rifle grenades down the tunnel to 3 and saw Legionnaires backlit by the explosion. Corpse debris, fingers, teeth, and patches of flesh mostly, sprayed back out into the courtyard in sufficient quantities to make the footing treacherous. My right foot rolled over a fat thumb, and I started to fall. I fought to regain my balance, but knowing I could not, I tucked myself into a ball and rolled. The move saved my life. From the overhang on the second level, a zombie squad opened up on me with a heavy machine gun. Tracer rounds struck sparks all around me, but I remained untouched. Given the lighter gravity and the blocky nature of my armor, my roll became a bump and bounce display that could not have been tracked accurately and that I could not control. I hit the wall and would have rebounded back into the courtyard, except that one of the re-dead Legionnaires absorbed the impact with a sickening crunch. I crunched her ribcage when I steadied myself with the left hand. Holding the AR-3000 like a pistol in my right hand, I burned a clip, walking fire along the overhang. But the ferrocrete safety wall provided cover for most of the Legionnaires up there. Mitch darted out of the infirmary and arced a satchel charge up and over the safety wall. The bomb detonated with a thunderclap and shook the whole gallery. Directly below ground zero, the walkway crumbled and collapsed. The safety wall channeled most of the explosive force out toward either end of the walkway, blasting apart the Legionnaires who had been seeking cover behind it. A few were blown into the courtyard, but they bounced bonelessly off the ground, then lay very still. I looked down at Harris and saw a huge hole where his left shoulder should have been. From the twisted metal around the wound, I could tell the machine gun burst had hit him from the flank and pushed fragments of his armor deep into his body cavity. I had no doubt he was dead. I looked for the detonator to activate the satchel charges he had left behind, but all I could see on his equipment harness was a bullet-riddled pouch from which sprouted brightly colored wires and chips of plastic. I knew the satchel charges had a digital timer that could be used to manually set them for a 10-second countdown, but the only charge I could reach would be the one set in the mouth of the tunnel to 3. Sealing the tunnel was certainly important and likely suicidal, but no more than any other part of this exercise. Ash, scour the tunnel to 3. The Attila unit dutifully turned his SSW-4200P on the tunnel as I crawled along the floor toward it. Ash's gun looked very much like a blowtorch as muzzle flares lit the front of the infirmary with brilliant fire. Silvery tracer afterimages circled the tunnel and stabbed deep into it. The Gatling cannon's whine filled the gallery with ghostly shrieking. Behind him, illuminated by the violent strobing of Ash's gun, the sacred warriors poured out of the infirmary. 2 of them joined hands beneath the hole in the catwalk, then boosted a 3rd and 4th of their number up through the hole. Those 2 warriors sprayed the catwalk with gunfire, then took up covering positions to be able to shoot Legionnaires coming in from deeper in the gallery itself. More of their compatriots joined them, then the rest of our party began to spread out and prepare a retreat back to the skiffs. The Attila stopped shooting when I reached the satchel charge, stuck to the mouth of the tunnel. Thick-fingered in gloves, I fumbled with the strap holding the canvas bag closed. Cursing to myself, I shoved my glove off and started to work on the straps. I almost drew my knife and cut through them, but the first one came loose and the second started to give, so I kept at it. Even as I peeled the canvas back to expose the timing mechanism and its little touchpad, a howling pack of necromutants burst forth from the executive tunnel. Most bore strangely altered guns whose barrels swelled, then convulsed down as if each bullet were being expelled like darts from a blowgun. Others, the ones streaking mindlessly in at my compatriots, carried wickedly barbed blades, slathered with dark liquid that absorbed all the available light. They would have been fodder to my compatriots' guns, except for the figure striding from behind the Dark Legion formation. His flesh was red as the Martian soil, and muscles bulging so much that they threatened to burst his skin. Ragathol paced into the courtyard as if an ancient, earthly noble on the trail of quarry with a pack of dogs. He brandished a saw-toothed halberd in his left hand, raising it above his spiked head, then gestured in a circular motion toward the infirmary and my companions. As one, they started shrieking and firing their weapons wildly. Mitch Hunter rolled on the ground, tearing at his armor as if it had become red hot. Yojimbo sank calmly to his knees and drew the shorter of his two swords, then started to rake it across the belly of his armor. Pam and Lane collapsed near the infirmary doorway, clutching each other tightly. Even Titus and Scythia staggered and sank back against the walls, jerking and making signs against evil. Ash turned his fire onto the necromutants and cut the swordsman in half with a concentrated stream of bullets. When the muzzle flashes died, he did not pause to reload the SSW 4200P with another drum of ammo, but waded out into the necromutants, crushing them with blows from his gun or his free left hand. Their bullets washed over him, but his armor held, and he advanced. His assault reduced the unit guarding Ragathol to a carpet of puling, bleeding organisms as effectively as a bear dispatching a pack of starveling curs nipping at him. Ragathol whipped his halberd around and sliced a full foot from the muzzles of Ash's gun. The Attila tried to lunge forward and stab Ragathol in the belly with the ragged metal barrels, but the Nephirite brought the butt end of his halberd up and caught Ash in the chest. The Attila flew up and back, bouncing off the catwalk's restraining wall, and then dropped to the ground again. Ash lost his gun, but climbed to his feet and prepared to receive Ragathol's continued attack. I punched 4 seconds onto the detonator, then hit the activation switch. Grabbing the shoulder strap on the canvas satchel, I rose to my feet and whirled the explosive package around. "Ash, shield Lorraine!" I screamed, and I let the bomb fly. At the sound of my voice, Ragathol turned and brought his halberd around in a guard position. That saved his life because the weapon's massive head deflected the satchel charge and started it off toward the tunnel to Gallery 4. That meant it was about 6 feet from Ragathol's left shoulder when it exploded. The blast sent the Nephirite spinning into the infirmary wall with enough force to drive one of his head spikes into the ferrocrete, then snap it off. I lost sight of him for a second in the fireball's incandescent glow. Then his form shredded the curtain of smoke in the center of the courtyard. Blackened flesh hung like crispy ribbons from the left side of his neck and torso. His left arm swung wildly amid a tangle of tissue threads. His left eye bounced off his charred cheekbone as he ran before me and on up the tunnel to the executive gallery. Leaving the gloves where they lay, I picked up my AR-3000 again and ran to the mouth of the executive tunnel. I triggered 2 bursts that ricocheted around the corner in the tunnel, but I could not tell if I hit anything or not. I did see a copious amount of thick liquid smeared on the tunnel wall. It shimmered with an oily film, and I might have taken it as some sort of industrial fluid had it not trailed from the point of the explosion into the tunnel. Ragathol had been hurt badly. Mitch shook himself as he staggered up. Damn that bastard. He made me think I was bleeding beneath my armor. I couldn't staunch my wounds. Yojimbo solemnly resheathed his sword, and he filled me with dread of having failed my master. He's bleeding a lot. I jerked a thumb at the tunnel. Shall we take the wolf by the ears? Hunter nodded. Inquisitor, have your explosives people seal the tunnels. We'll be using the executive gallery to get out. Rex, Yojimbo, we go first. The rest of you follow, but carefully. I think Mitch admonished them to use caution, because the three of us were anything but cautious. Like tigers that have tasted blood, we stalked up the tunnel. It leveled out for 20 meters, then went up and in for another 30. As we mounted that slope, Mitch slammed a new clip into his M50. Remember, we can hit him from range, which is advisable because he still might be able to use some strange power to incapacitate us. Yojimbo nodded. Then we crested the passage and all stopped. Even if Mitch had not cautioned us to avoid a close engagement, I don't think any of us would have taken a single step forward. What we saw below was too strange and pitiful to invite our interference. All I could do was lower my gun and stare. 15 meters down, at the base of a blood-splattered causeway, Ragathol knelt before a huge statue. I recognized the seated figure at once from my encounter with the mirror at Larkspur. Chipped out of pure obsidian, the representation of Muwaji sat back and stared down mercilessly at the torn and bleeding Nephirite. Aside from spectral green lights reflecting on the statue from above, the only color in it came from the ivory set in its eyes. My blood ran cold as I realized that ivory came from my bones. I had looked out of those eyes because they were part of me until Muwaji had severed the link between us. I had been in his chamber before, in spirit, and I had seen Ragathol beg from the vantage point so high above him. "Master," he wailed, anointing the statue's feet with his blood. "I have been defiled and abandoned. I am yours. Do not let me fall to ruin. Do not waste all that I am. Let me serve you without subterfuge, and smite thine enemies for thee." I took off my helmet and bowled it toward the causeway. It hit Ragathol in the ass, and he jerked up as if he'd been hit with an anti-aircraft missile. "He thinks you're a wretched failure, Ragathol. You'll get no help from him." The Nephirite looked back at us, then slavishly draped himself over the idol's feet, licking them clean of the blood he had splashed over them. "Go away. This place is sacred." Hunter nodded, then raised his assault rifle to his shoulder. "You better hope this place really is sacred, because this is where we bury you." I raised my gun and Yojimbo did likewise, but before we could shoot, something happened. Ragathol began to glow. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 33, End.